Welcome to the Metagame with me, Oni Blackmage, here to help you with some general tips and analysis of the mechanics and units in codename S.T.E.A.M to help guide your strike team to victory. Now the main thing to remember in this game is that progression is completely horizontal, so there is no growth or upgrading of any character or gear. Rather, more equipment and characters of varying effects are found and utilized. That being said, there is no ultimate combination of characters and gears, as campaign maps force variety and opponents online will be similarly equipped. Let's start by understanding how to enhance your basic offensive tactics with knockback, stunning, and critical hits. Now, knockback can be in any direction, and usually as far as 1 to 3 spaces, but is usually opposite the direction it was actually hit from. This can actually be used tactically to knock an enemy off an edge, into a hazard, or closer to another teammate to be finished off. Keep in mind that walls and obstacles can actually continue and ricochet knockback. For extra damage, headshots are actually applicable to some units, definitely the human ones, for a little bit of bonus damage, as well as critical hits flat out double your damage. The main condition to be concerned about is stunned. Stun equals an automatic critical hit, sometimes usually a knockback, however this is only on the first hit. If there's an attack that actually involves multiple hits, keep in mind only the first hit will actually be critical. Keep in mind that healing actually cures the stun condition, just in case you happen to be scouting and stunned by incident. Now the critical weak points are the glowing purple-pink spots on aliens, however, agents actually have a critical weak point too, which is actually that sparkling spot on the back of a Steam pack in case you're doing multiplayer. Finally, note that headshots, critical hits, and stun damage can actually all stack for massive damage. Finally, in regards to the Overwatch tactic, unfortunately there's no actual way to see if a unit is in Overwatch, except for possibly getting spotted and getting back into cover before you notice their line of sight red line actually trigger. Keep in mind you can actually shoot around corners if possible with splash damage. Note that hitting or getting hit by an Overwatch actually has a high chance of stun and knockback for each hit. Fortunately, you can see the alert status of an enemy based on the color of their eyes. If it's green, it means they're really not alert and they're not targeting anyone, perfect to be taken by surprise. If it's yellow, it means that they're aware of a threat, but they're not actually targeting anyone. And if it's red, it means they have a threat in sight and you should expect an attack very soon. Now let's cover the characters. Now what makes each character distinct are their weight classes, which determines which boiler they can use, their unique main weapon, their special attack, and their support ability. Many maps are ideally suited towards specific characters, and often it's the map they're introduced in going forward. Every character can carry one sub-weapon, and many sub-weapons are actually similar but weaker versions of other main characters, meaning some characters can actually play a weaker version of another character. Keep in mind I will not be covering Stovepipe, whom you get after getting 100,000 medals and clearing the game, or the amiibo characters, none of whom are all completely out. Do keep in mind though that those 5 characters are actually non-customizable anyway. First is the default character Henry. He's actually the only middle weight class character that's actually offensive. However, his offense is very applicable to many situations, making a staple on many teams. His steam rifle actually deals automatic critical damage against flying enemies, not to mention has among the best range and attack for most standard weapons. His special attack is also one of the few ranged offensive ones to boot, meaning that while he has no particular strengths, he's actually a very reliable unit to fix in any particular subclass of weapon. So if you want to equip him with a medical weapon to back up your healing, you can. If you want to back him up for explosives, you can. If you want to make him a support utility character, you absolutely can. Henry is incredibly versatile the entire game through. Next is John. He's going to be your first heavy character, and his bear grenade launcher is the first explosive weapon that you're going to be receiving. Keep in mind that what these are mainly used for is breaking apart cover or breaking open the gold boxes. Keep in mind the way that his grenade launcher works is that it fires in an arc, so it fires over enemies and over cover. Unfortunately, this makes him mostly useful for outdoor maps, as indoor maps severely limits his range. If you want to have a backup weapon that's similar to John but don't actually want to use John, consider equipping a grenade launcher. There's a cluster grenade launcher or a light grenade launcher. The light one is a more expensive and lighter hitting version of his grenade launcher, while the cluster version actually hits a wider spread area, though that's a double edge. Keep in mind that he has the hidden ability in which he has improved defense on his machine side, taking about 30% less damage. Next is Lion, who's another heavy character, and very unique and versatile. He's going to come equipped with not only his Lion Launcher, making him the only character who can move and attack at the same time, not to mention create some very interesting routes along some maps, especially when you're trying to make a beeline directly for the goal. But his sub-weapon that he introduces is actually the crossbow, an amazingly useful gift not for himself but also many other characters. What makes Lion great is not only that he's very bulky, so he can take quite a few hits, but he's also able to reduce damage by 20% for the entire team, making him an excellent frontline vanguard. Consider equipping him with similar short-range weapons like the shuriken launcher or the shotgun. Next is Tigerlily, another medium character, though one of the many support characters you'll be receiving. What makes her unique is that her Medi Mortar not only allows to heal in an area of effect, very similar to John's grenade launcher, however, she can also heal herself, and the only character to be able to do so. Her special is also healing oriented, so if you want to be able to have one character support other classes while everyone else can just continue pressing the advantage, Tigerlilies are going to be very useful, especially in areas where the resistance is very firm and or areas where you can expect to take a lot of splash damage from other enemies. She's the right choice for many teams in which they favor a more aggressive style, which sometimes means a lot more hits being taken. If you want to have a similar medic character, the medic Carbine is actually a very versatile choice for nearly any other character, allowing them to have precision healing for many other characters. Unfortunately, there is no splash healing weapon. Tom Sawyer may seem very deceptive. His punch gun may seem gimmicky, but it's arguably one of the most useful weapons in the entire game. Not only is he lightweight with very minor hit points, he actually has very high steam recovery. While he may be mostly used for scouting, keep in mind his punch gun not only damages but also knocks back and has a very high chance for stunning. Tom Sawyer is actually very useful for not only his punch gun also being a 1 steam usage, meaning his secondary sub-weapon can be just about anything you want it to. I've had a lot of success with the mine layer, laying down a mine right behind an enemy and then punching them right into it, not only dealing damage but also them, if they're stunned, dealing double damage from the mine they just got hit into. Not to mention, the crossbow as well as the shotgun are also excellent choices for him. Later when he gets the Scout or the Ninja Pack, which allows him to increase his critical damage, Tom Sawyer easily becomes one of the most damaging characters on a team. Unfortunately, there is no sub-weapon very similar to his punch gun. Queequeg is going to be a variant character, similar to John. Heavy and bulky, his penguin launcher may seem very unwieldy at first, because you actually have to directly aim it and it has to walk at a line of sight to its target. However, this thing has unlimited range essentially, meaning on many flat maps with no cover, Queequeg can actually hit enemies far beyond their countering range, and far beyond their Overwatch range as well. Not to mention his special, while not dealing the most damage, can also deal direct damage at a distance, one of the few people able to do so. His ability to increase the attack of everyone in the team means that Queequeg is going to be a very large staple midway through the game. However, as you may expect, Queequeg is ideally suited for indoor maps as opposed to John, who's suited for outdoor maps. Another thing to keep in mind is that the camera actually follows the penguins he follows, meaning it's possible for people that are quick on the trigger to actually check around corners and use the penguin to actually scout. Next is Scarecrow, who is another light character but mostly only support. His pumpkin stunner is a very useful weapon. Not only does it create a giant bomb that has 2 ways of detonating it, either you directly firing it or detonating right before the enemy's turn, this has a very large range and can take up an entire space, meaning that it can block off creative choke points. He's unfortunately the most fragile character, so you have to use him very intelligently. The great news about his pumpkin stunner is that it cannot stun you, so feel free to use other devices such as the musket, crossbow, or anything else that can take advantage of multiple stunned enemies. Scarecrow in the right map settings can actually easily turn around an entire battle by constantly stunning the opposing side. Next is Randall, who is another medium character with a very interesting main weapon, the Unspeakable Lure. What this does is that, when it fired, it actually forces many enemies to change their line of sight towards the actual lure. Keep in mind that enemies are only going to turn until they spot an enemy or the lure, whichever comes first, so this may not always benefit you. The good news is that turning an enemy in a specific direction can easily have them expose their weak spot for everyone else to take advantage of. With Randolph's ability to not only increase critical hit damage, but also the lure works on nearly every single enemy, including many bosses, means that you can keep many enemies and bosses occupied on the lure, expose their weak points, and have your team set up a tactical position. If you want to have a similar effect but not necessarily use Randolph, although given his critical boost you might really want to consider keeping him on the team as soon as he's available, consider the Rattle Cannon, which does something very similar. The Fox is actually arguably, and popularly, the most useful character in the entire game with her sniper rifle skill. The Steam Crossbow has been your taste of sniping so far, and the Fox easily exceeds that with the longest range, most accurate weapon. Keep in mind that it's really only mainly useful for sniping, however nearly every enemy requires and necessitates it. Her weapon is so powerful it can actually break barriers and gold boxes despite not being an explosive weapon. And her Overwatch ability will refill her steam, meaning she can actually hold down many positions before enemies actually advance on you. As a rifle, she also does extra damage against aerial enemies, and being a light character, she can take advantage of the ninja pack, which will easily boost her critical hit damage. There are so many bosses that will be felled directly by the Fox, not to mention if you play multiplayer, she'll easily be racking up most of the kills. Next is Califia. What makes her interesting is that she's the third of the explosive heavy weapons dealers, however hers is more of a traditional rocket launcher, so not only does it rely more on manual aiming, it's a little bit more like a mix between John's Bear Grenade and Queequeg's Penguin Launcher. However, one thing to note is that when she's unlocked, the levels start getting a lot more vertical, so Queequeg stops being a little bit more versatile, and John is a little less viable as well, making her the ideal heavy weapons user. The Tinman is an interesting character. He's medium class, and his weapon directly exchanges the 3 steam it costs to 3 steam to another character. So it makes him an interesting support character to allow one to press the advantage with other hard-hitting characters. The steam projector also has surprisingly great range, and by being a machine man, his damage reduction is actually reduced by about 20% overall. Finally, Dorothy is a very particular type of light character. While she is very similar to Tom in terms of her regeneration and her light class, her Toto Blaster is a very interesting arc attacking weapon, so it attacks in a very linear arc sort of fashion. It's very similar to the Shuriken Blaster or the Nail Gun, with meaning she can deal incredible damage up close, but the further and further an enemy or target is away, the less damage it's going to consecutively take. So you need to use her very smartly. She's more of an offensive based Tom. If you manage to get her in the right position, her Toto Blaster deals somewhere upwards to 20 hits, meaning she can reduce characters very quickly, especially if she hits in a critical spot or a headshot. But these are some notable sub-weapons. While they don't particularly cater to one particular character, they mostly are suited for if you like short-range or long-range tactics. I note these because they seem to be the most useful overall in terms of many situations, and the most effective for not only Steam, but also the situations they can be used in. First and foremost is the shotgun, which is surprisingly accurate, very decent range for what's assumed to be a short-term weapon, and absolutely devastating since these count as one hit. If you hit a stunned character with it, even though it's firing 7 shots, they all hit at the same time, meaning the critical hit damage is across every single shot. The mine layer is very useful. Setting up traps around many of these tight corridors is surprisingly useful. Same thing for the supply crate. The supply crate can actually also be highly used for creating cover, blocking line of sight, which is especially useful on levels that have those floating eyeballs that act as spotters for artillery units. I cannot recommend the stun mortar enough. For 2 steam, you launch an area of effect stunning attack that deals very light damage, but more importantly, has a very high rate of stun. You can apply the stun mortar to any character and instantly notice the increased effectiveness in battle your team is experiencing. Next is the Sentry. The Sentry is a surprisingly expensive unit, but basically might as well be a hidden 5th character. Not only does it draw aggro from nearly any enemy, including bosses, this thing has about 2 or 3 hits worth of Overwatch, deals about 6 attacks worth at a very decent rifle damage, and occupies a space. In all effects, this is one of the best ways of not only drawing attention and something that can not only defend itself and take quite a few hits, but also press the advantage or hold a particular point to make sure you're not flanked, especially by backups. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this brief video on tips for this. This is not meant to be comprehensive, but only meant to mention a few more of the more effective weapons and a few more of the tactically useful characters. As you explore your own style, you'll find winning combination for yourself, and if you like particular combination for your team, make sure to listen in the comments below, as well if there are any particular tips on maps or weapons that you'd like to mention here. Once again, thanks for watching the MetaGame, and I'll see you on the next battlefield.